United 11?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you talking to Clarence yet?
We're getting it now.
Okay. Is your name Clarence? Because then I could say call Clarence Clarence. I like it.
So do I.
We're here today with Chris Henry, Programs Coordinator at EAA, and Hal Bryan, Senior Editor also at EAA. Thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us a little bit.
No, thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be talking. It's great to have human interaction.
Yeah, no kidding. Even if it is through a screen like everybody else seems to be doing.
Exactly.
So for those that may not know you, we have an interesting connection with Chris, and that Chris used to be a tower controller here in Elkhart. And Chris and I have actually talked a lot of times, if not actually more times over the radio than ever in person. And Chris has put up with me on the frequency and cleared me to land I don't know how many times. So we've had Chris around for a long time. In fact, one thing I wanted to share with everybody who might not know, we all miss having Chris around because he was always really good on the frequency about commenting on your airplane. Talking about it was a really nice whatever it was that you brought in, or a really nice landing or some other thing. And I saw so many guys taxi into the ramp like they were 10 feet tall because they had just gotten a tower hug. And we all really miss that. So
Well, that means a lot to hear. Thank you. I always consider Elkhart Airport my home airport, so it was really cool to be a part of that, and thank you for those kind words.
Sure. Well, it was a good time. So I'll let you guys pick who goes first, but I'm interested in your start in aviation and what led you ultimately to the EAA.
I choose Chris.
I've been an airplane geek since I was a kid. When I was 16, my friend Claire, he called one day and just said, hey, do you want to go to Oshkosh? And I was kind of like blown away. And I'm like, you mean Wisconsin? And he's like, well, there's no Oshkosh, Pittsburgh. And I was like, okay. So, I had to ask my parents, of course, they knew Claire. He was a family friend. And they said, yeah, and there we are. We're off and running. And we drove to Oshkosh, stayed in the dorms. And I was looking at airplanes that I had only ever read about. I mean, and there they are sitting there with no ropes around them or anything. You can walk up to them, look up in the wheel wells and things like that. And I thought that was, and I still continue to think that is such a neat part of it is there's no bars or ropes. And so a lot of times if you talk to the owner or the pilot who's there, you can really kind of learn more about the aircraft, even maybe get a behind the scenes look at it. So I was just enamored with the whole atmosphere, the whole background to EAA. So I knew that's sort of what I wanted to do. Eventually, of course, I worked on medical helicopters and air traffic controller. And then in 2013, I got to come work here. So it's been an awesome ride ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. And share with us a little bit, what do you do there at EAA?
The thing I always like to tell people is you kind of have your core job, which is what you work on every day. And that is for me, where I'm on the museum team. So I help with putting together special events, talks, our movie night. I work with Hal on the movie night. And that entails, working with like marketing and social media, things like that. Our docent program, which is our dedicated group of volunteers who give tours throughout the museum throughout the year. I'm a part of the team with the oral history program, our Timeless Voices program. And then there's you have the, what I say is this needs done and we all need to pitch in. And that is, you work on air venture planning, you get to work on just different features, attractions throughout the year, not just air venture, events like Space Day and Family Flight Fest and, different fly-ins. And I get to work with the pubs team, doing things like for E-Hotline, things like that. So and I think Hal will agree, like you have a core job, but then you have we're all a team and we all bring different talents to the table that we kind of get utilized for other options too. And it kind of breaks up the day, to be honest, because you always know what you're sort of going to be working on, but it also, you get some neat projects kind of handed to you that you didn't think you'd be working on. And I think that's really part of an enjoyable piece of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's certainly
Absolutely.
enough to keep you busy. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it keeps you busy. That's yeah.
So I have to ask you, other than AirVenture, what is your favorite event or attraction that happens every year at EAA?
Oh boy. I'm gonna be biased because it's also something I work on, but I really have a good time with our speaker series, where we get different people to come in and speak each month. We've had some pretty amazing people, and usually we try to highlight them on the Green Dots. You probably heard a lot of them on our Green Dot podcast, but that's pretty neat. My friends who don't really get into aviation, who don't 100% know what I do, they're just sort of like, so is your job just to like find people you want to hang out with and then invite them to your museum? And I'm like, sorta, yeah, a little bit.
Awesome. Well, Hal, what's been your experience?
So my my aviation background goes back to really before I was born. My parents both worked for United Airlines. Dad was a captain, mom was a stewardess. And when they got married in 1959, those being the progressive times that they were, my mom had to quit because you couldn't be married and be a stewardess back then. But we were both very proud of their time at United. Dad stayed with United 37 years. So I'm a second generation pilot. When I was 8 years old, we moved from California to Washington State and lived on a private airstrip for the next 10 years. And then went off to college and did all kinds of things. Had bounced around a few different jobs and careers. Ended up at Microsoft for about 15 years. I spent 11 of those working on the flight simulator series. So it was a great fit for me as a computer geek and an airplane geek in one. And as part of that job, I managed a lot of our external relationships and would manage our presence at trade shows and things like that. So I was coming to Oshkosh every summer to work, to have a booth for Microsoft and all that kind of thing. I had a close partnership and good friendship with some people at EAA. Then, what was it, about a little more than 11 years ago, January of 2009, Microsoft shut down our whole division and gave us the opportunity either to sort of look around, do something else in the company, or take our severance and go. And I always joke that when you go to a job interview at Microsoft and they say, are you passionate about pivot tables and Microsoft Excel? Well, no, I like airplanes better than that, but thank you. So right around that time that we got news that we were being shut down, I got a note from a friend of mine at EAA who was a VP at the time, Adam Smith, and he said, "Hey, I know it's a long shot, Hal, but I just posted a job you might be interested in." And we talked back and forth very regularly over the next few months about, whether that was something that was even possible. And at the end of the day, EAA made me a terrific offer. And my wife and I sat down and talked about it. We were ready to leave, all our family, all our friends, and move a couple thousand miles. And, we decided that, that was the right thing to do. So I came to Oshkosh, started as the online community manager at EAA in 2009. And then about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, accepted a very happy promotion to the role of senior editor on a publications team. So I work on Sport Aviation magazine. I write features. I edit every page along with a strong team of editors. I get to work on books, as Chris well knows, working on web content, blog content. But Chris made a great point when he talked about, well, there's your core job, and then there's all the other things. And I will tell anybody who asks that I've never worked anywhere where any talent I have or anything that I want to get involved in or try to do, where those things have been more, where there have been more opportunities, and those things have been more appreciated than at EAA. I mean, I'm an editor, but I end up hosting a lot of events. Chris and Tom Charpentier and I kicked off the Green Dot podcast together. I do voiceover work for videos. I write scripts for videos. I consult with our merchandise team on aircraft, minutia and trivia. It's a weird list. It just goes on and on and on. But that's the joy of working at a place like that. There's always that strong sense of I don't want to say the show must go on, but it's something like that. It's just we're a team. It's all hands on deck, and if something needs doing, people step up and do it.
That's really fantastic. That's really so. I have to ask you. I know that you worked on Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it must be such an honor and a way to be involved in something that was a part of almost every single pilot's development at some point in their flying career. I mean, I can remember starting up my ancient IBM PC and starting off on the field at MiGs in my, I think it was either a 172 or a 150, something like that. But what was what did you do in the flight simulator program, and what version did you start?
So I started there in 1998. So Flight Simulator 98 was just being released. So I worked on some after release stuff there, then switched right over to Combat Flight Simulator. And then for a couple of years, it was just back and forth, work on the combat version, work on the civilian version. So I touched a little bit of Flight Simulator 98, but the first full version of regular Flight Simulator I worked on was 2000. So then 02 and all the way up through FSX and the expansion pack and stuff through the bitter end. I started as a software test engineer, a software design engineer in test, and was a test lead for quite a while, which basically meant, you get to sit down and use Flight Sim all day, every day. And I had this crazy cockpit set up in my office, and then write down everything. Some people say the testers break software, and I disagree with that. I just made note of all the ways that we could make it better.
Okay.
So, we'd work on any one version for about 2 years, and any one of us on the test team would probably in that time report 2,500, maybe as many as 3,000 bugs. Worked through those, get those resolved. I worked on design specifications quite a bit, did some subject matter stuff. Made a really cool research trip to EAA in the off season. It was my first time in Oshkosh outside of AirVenture, and got to fly EAA's Ford Trimotor and the Spirit of St. Louis replica as research. Which it was, but man, that was a blast.
Awesome.
So I did those things for quite a while. Then I transitioned to actually do a very similar job that I started with at EAA, and that was more of my job title was community evangelist / business development manager. So working directly with the community and running our external beta testing programs, managing our trade shows, all that kind of stuff. And then working a little bit on ESP, which if your sim fans out there now know that as Prepared from Lockheed Martin. But when we still owned it at Microsoft, it was ESP.
Wow.
Sorry for that really long answer.
No, that's okay. I have one more question. So I was fortunate enough to be involved last year in a flight test program to develop the flight test data for a Level D simulator and a Citation.
Oh, cool.
Citation XL. So I went through that program, and it was several weeks long, and we were going out every day for hours a day with a fully instrumented airplane and doing all kinds of things in order to gather the data it would take to program that Level D sim. So my question was for Flight Simulator at Microsoft, did you do something similar with the 172 and with all those other airplanes that were modeled in the game?
Wherever possible, certainly we did. We did a lot of video. We, go fly wherever possible. When we were modeling an airplane, there was at least a couple of us on the team that would fly it. In the case of heavy airliners and things, that meant actually spending a lot of overnights at flight safety, flying the Level D sims, and capturing video, making notes, coming in with sort of a pre-planned test cards and then capturing data. And then working with our photo and sound guys to capture recordings, everything from, what does this switch sound like when you flip it in the Cessna Caravan to, boom mics outside to capture engine starts and engine noise, things like that. So we certainly did as much of that as we possibly could. And in many cases, not all, but in many cases, worked really closely with manufacturers to validate our efforts as well.
It's interesting because when the company that did ours, they did the exact same thing with the physical airplane, recording the sound of switches and motion of moving switches and so forth. And I always thought as a pilot, excuse me, that a lot of your Level D simulators were actual airplane parts. In fact, I had been told a long time ago that a lot of them were retired airplanes that had been then converted to simulators. And that was probably true at one time, but even now in Level D simulators, a lot of the equipment that's in them is simulated stuff. That's
Right.
actually the part number that flies on the airplane, but it sure does feel like it.
Yeah, that's the goal. And that was always so much fun for us to, you know, build a $40, $50, $60, you know, consumer level piece of software, and then watch the hardest of the hardcore go out there and build things that would start to get, you know, sort of in the neighborhood of almost competing with the level D sims because they were taking, you know, a junk 747 cockpit and building it into their basement and starting to wire it up. There was one example I always use, a guy in Australia who had spent, at the time, it was between $250,000 and $300,000 US to build a 747 cockpit in his basement. And then, you know, then you got it done, and then, oh, I got to run to Walmart and buy Microsoft Flight Simulator to make the entire thing work. And I always point out, I think we're on the right side of this equation. But, you know, because, you know, we'll make it up in volume, but it was still just crazy. You know, one person goes and buys a $30 joystick, and this guy spends $250,000 to build the complete cockpit in the basement. But they're out there, and God bless all of them.
You know, I don't think my wife would ever let me be that guy, but I would like to know that guy.
I know. I'd like to be able to drop by that guy's house, you know, once or twice a month.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'd even pay him for an hour or two, you know?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the green dot. I mean, that's how I know Chris from past experience. I feel like, Hal, that's where I got to know you a little bit better, but where did the green dot come from?
Well, it was originally the Third Musketeer, Tom Charpentier, had the original idea, saying, you know, hey, we should do a podcast. And so talked about that and put our heads together. And I had been doing an independent movie-related podcast for a while, had an aviation bent. So it was kind of top of my mind as well. But, you know, three of us sat down and brainstormed. And Chris, I think the first thing we came up with was the name. So we thought that was the most important thing. It was like, well, we got to name it, and then we'll see if we know how to actually make it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we had all kinds of suggestions, but we, pun intended, we landed on the green dot, and then we recorded a sample episode, and we just kind of did this on our own, and then played it for the bosses and said, hey, this is something we'd like to try. You know, what do you think? And they said, you know, go for it, give it a go. And so we put an episode out there. The feedback was great. We started, you know, doing that more and more. I meant to look. I don't even have the slightest idea, Chris, where we are in terms of number of episodes total.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
It's got to be a lot by now.
So, I mean, I know we passed 50 a long time ago, and I remember thinking, oh, we should have done something for our 50th episode. But anyway,
we got to be closing in on 100, I would guess.
I would sure think so.
Yeah.
So with 100 episodes in, I mean, I know you guys have a Rolodex that's pretty long, but do you ever feel like you might run out of content?
You know, anytime we start to wonder if that might be the case, then the three of us get together and do one of our favorite aviation movie and TV show episodes.
Yeah.
We've done 3 of those so far. The feedback's always really strong. And we always come into it with these great big lists. Okay, I'm going to talk about these 40 movies. And, you know, you end up talking about 2 of them at length. And we realize, okay, yeah, we've got plenty to go. But, you know, there are, people might ask the same question about Sport Aviation Magazine or our blog or any other or any other EAA channel. And boy, if you ever start thinking that there's no more stories out there, anybody you're just not quite looking hard enough, because there are incredible stories everywhere. And as you said, we've got a wonderful Rolodex. We're very, very blessed in the sense that most people in aviation will, at least sort of figuratively speaking, will return our calls. You know, when you say, well, from EAA here in Oshkosh, it's like, oh, I know what Oshkosh is. That's pretty cool. I'll talk to you. So that's always great. But there's a million great stories out there.
Well, that kind of leads us in a good direction. Speaking of stories, so we had Chris Henry join us in Elkhart. Boy, Chris, I don't know how long it was ago. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yeah, probably.
I would think. And we had Chris come in and give a talk on the B-17, and I had heard from other people that it's really great, but I hadn't heard it myself. And we put it out there for folks, and we've got a pretty large hangar there in Elkhart. It's 28,000 square feet in that building. And I was shocked by how many people we had streaming in the door. I think we stopped counting at 150 or 200 people. And I remember talking to Chris early on before he spoke. And I said, so Chris, tell me how does this go? How does the presentation go? And, you know, more or less what he said to me was, well, anybody can tell you how long it was or how many engines it had or how much gas it carried, but I'm going to tell you about the people who flew it. And for the next 2 hours or so, he had everybody in that room, pilots and non-pilots alike, just riveted with story after story. And I was so excited to see when the book came out, to see more of that. And so I was really anxious to hear how you got going on the book and kind of how that got started. Oh, there it is, the final mission.
Oh, except my virtual background is messing with it. So just call that a special effect.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So I'm so glad you did a book. Thank you for doing that. The presentation's incredible, but it's nice to have it immortalized in that way. But tell me about how the book came about.
Well, it's it's kind of funny. This is what we always say is Jack Pelton said, go make a book, and Jim Bush said, go make a book. And Hal, myself, and the team went and made a book. So
the end. Any questions? Thank you.
Let's go talk, guys. Okay, we'll see you later.
That's exactly.
What the talk that I give. Sorry, my battery is dying on me here rather quickly for some reason. The talk that I give, it's the stories that we've collected along the way with our B-17 aluminum overcast. And I gave the talk one night, I think it was for the boards. And Rose Pelton came, and she really enjoyed it. And she said, you know, Jack, you guys should do a book. And so I joked, but that is really where it came from, is that shortly after we got an email from Jack and said, you guys should put one together. And I think when we all started pulling together the meetings around it, and one of the things that I think we immediately saw where it was different was there have been books written about the B-17 and the technical aspects of it. And there have been books written about the lives of the crew members on board the airplane. But there's never been a look at a certain B-17 that maybe still exists and the lives that it has touched in current time and in contemporary time. And it doesn't help or doesn't hurt that we have a lot of the veterans, we have the families, we're in touch with a lot of them, so they were able to share stories and photos. We have a B-17, so we were able to go do beautiful air-to-air shots and recordings inside, which Hal can touch on, because that's part of where the publications team really showed off, in my opinion, is the content that's inside the book. It's just a cool combination. You have these amazing, powerful stories, original wartime photos, combined with modern day pictures of the airplane flying, video. You can actually go for a ride. Let's say you can't get on B-17 and go flying. Through the book, there's an app where you can actually, or there's a component of it that allows you to go sit in a pilot seat and go flying on the airplane. So I've never seen a book ever like that with all that stuff mixed into it about the B-17. And I think that it's easy to look at a black and white photo and just kind of pass by it and say, oh, that's a neat picture. But when you dig deeper and you find out that these people that were in these black and white photos, you know, they were sons and husbands and daughters, and, you know, they had lives all of their own, and there's a story about what their wartime experiences were like. And when you start calling them out, they're all incredible stories. I mean, I think that was one of the harder parts of it, was trying to call down this list of what do we put in the book and who do we not, because they're all just amazing stories. But we couldn't make a book, you know, 6 feet tall or something like that. So, but I think that's where immediately when we sat down and we saw everything that we had, that we were able to pull together, and Hal will touch on it, because I mean, Hal and the publications team were such a huge part of it that I think we immediately knew that this was going to be special, and I hope that everybody that worked on it knew that it was special along the way. Hal, what do you think?
I think we absolutely recognize that very early on. Now, I'm privileged to be listed as a sort of a supporting co-author. And, you know, on the spine, it says Chris Henry with Hal Bryan. And that's, you know, if Chris, I'm going to date myself, but if you're Tony Orlando, I'm Don. That's the best I can do on short notice. These are Chris's stories, and Chris pulled all these together, and you know, and sort of laid them out in a Word document. And my role coming into it was just to help polish things a little bit, just to help sort of organize things a little bit, maybe not even a little bit differently, just organize things and work on sort of transitions from sort of section to section, and just help figure out, you know, how the content was really going to flow. Do a little bit of supplemental writing here and there, but absolutely 100% a team effort. There's a really, really strong editorial team that I work closely with. It's, you know, those are my immediate colleagues. So working on copy editing and proofreading and things like that. And every page, I mean, I've read every page once the writing piece of it was done. I mean, I read every page, reviewed every page at least 12 times as it goes through, you know, Word documents, and then preliminary layouts and all these sorts of things are, I think, one of the biggest tips of the hat. And I know Chris would agree, goes to Brandon Jacobs, our designer, who had never made a book before. And we told him, you're really good at designing things. Just go ahead and make a book. It's fine. You'll figure it out. And he really did. And he became an expert on how you make books. Because we've done other books before with EAA. I did one a couple of years ago. It was with the Best of AirVenture Photography, but that was all an external publisher. So we sort of turned out the content, provided the pictures, sent it off to them, and they did all the work to make the book. But with this one, everything was done in-house. Other than, you know, the actual printing, which is done by the same printer who does our magazine every month. So a joy and a privilege to work on, and absolutely humbling to have been able to have a small hand in helping Chris get these stories out there. And these stories need to be out there.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing to have such powerful resources, you know, in the same building to do something.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, Chris made the point offhand, and you know, there's more than once during the production of this book when we're talking about, you know, we're organizing it by crew station, some of the stories, and then one of us said, you know, we should really do a nice detailed photo shoot of each crew station, and then we laugh and say, imagine how hard it would be to do this book if, you know, we didn't own a B-17.
Well, let's go walk down and take a look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go raid the museum for some original, you know, U.S. Army Air Force's equipment from the period, and let's go set that in those stations in the B-17, because A, the photos will be better, and B, because we can.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So absolutely, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches. My hat is tipped to the people out there who can, you know, create, I guess, I don't know if there's been a book like this, but can create a book on any topic. And, you know, what all they have is sort of the research materials on the shelf behind them, as opposed to us. And then, you know, when the time came and said, well, we should probably go fly the airplane and do some new air-to-air photos and new video and stuff. You know, I should probably talk my way into the left seat of the B-17 for the first time, just to feel like that'll make me a much better editor of the book if I've gotten my half hour of in the left seat. So, you know, ridiculously lucky, just indescribably lucky.
So tell us, of all the stories that you've got and those in the book, which one kind of resonates with you most?
Well, Chris, you know mine, and I would ask you to share it, but it's the jacket that had to be shipped.
Yeah.
This just gets me every time.
Do you want to tell it, Hal, or do you want me to tell it?
No, please. These are your stories. I'll just correct you when you're done.
You can edit me. So first off, let me say that I was very lucky to have a team like this with me. And Hal's very humble. Without Hal, this book would not be what it is today. And if I haven't said it enough, brother, I'm really proud to work with you on this. And,
it's my pleasure. And without me, it would be a different book, but without you, thered be no book.
Well, without all of us, it'd be a coloring book. That's for sure. Without you guys. So,
Brandon, can you give us a moment, please? We need to hunt this out.
I got it.
So, Hal, the story that Hal's talking about is we had a we had a media flight set up. We always do media flights on a Thursday, and I want to say we were in Colorado, and we had the flight set up, and I was really geeked out because I was helping Nicole with the media flight, and it was kind of the first time I was really taking one of these on my own. The media can be a little dodgy sometimes. I mean, because they have to cover breaking news and stuff. So, they'll say they'll be there, but hopefully they show up. But you know that if something happens in town that, they're going to have to go and cover that. They have a responsibility to do that. So we have one waist gunner who was a B-17 World War II vet. His family's going to come out and watch him fly. And then the rest of the airplane is filled with the media. And I think there was a singer that got caught trying to smuggle a monkey into an airport, and the media was like all over that. Like they're like, we want to go cover that. So I'm left with one newspaper gentleman, the veteran, and that's it. And traditionally, that's not really a good reason to go fly. I mean, that's not a media flight goal. Let's put it that way. Because, you want to get the word out that you're in town. So you want to have as full of an airplane as you can have. And, but at the same token, it's like, well, we've built this day up for this veteran and his family who's traveled from all over. We don't dare let them down. And Christy Bussey and Olivia in our Air Tours department agreed. They were like 100%, we need to fly. So we put the veteran on board. We put the newspaper reporter on board, and then we put the rest of the veteran's family on board. And we filled the rest of the airplane with his family, and we went flying. And that was on a Thursday. The following Monday, I get a phone call from his son, and the veteran's son is saying, well, I need to buy the jacket. If you've all seen the B-17 jacket, it's embroidered on the back. You can only get it once you've flown on the airplane. My wife always jokes that I ordered mine when we were taxiing in from the first time I got to fly on it. So, and I'm like, yeah, great. I can help you order this jacket. And he's like, well, I need to overnight it. So we started looking, and I remember it was going to be like $62 or something like that to overnight this jacket. And I'm like, I can 3-day ship it to you for like $12 or something like that, and he was like, no, we have to overnight it. And I said, okay, well, by the way, how did the flight go? And he said, well, the flight went amazing, and we all got to go flying with Dad. And we figured we're all together, something that doesn't happen a lot. So we all went to dinner that night with Dad. And Dad mentioned that after each flight, they would have a shot of whiskey. I think it was whiskey. And so after dinner, we had a shot with Dad. And then he pulls this little notebook out, and he writes in it. And here, this notebook was filled of all the missions he flew and the places that he went, with little notes of like heavy fighter cover or, easy target or for lots of flak, stuff like that. And he just wrote, mission number 36, I flew with my family today. And I'm like, man, that's really cool. And he goes, well, that night we all went home, and Dad passed in his sleep. Oh. And the jacket is because we want to bury him in the jacket. And that jacket from that day forward, that always took on a different tone for me. It wasn't just cool because it was B-17 related. I always think of that veteran and that family. And that's also what we're doing with the airplane. We're bringing families together to honor their loved one, a lot of times when they're still here, a lot of times when they're not. But think about what his last day was like. He wasn't just sitting at home, alone or just with one family member. His entire family was with him, and he went flying on a B-17 again. And then, that night they all went to dinner. I mean, that's an event. That is a big deal. And that's one little thing that our airplane was able to give that family. And then there's many stories similar to that, but that's one that I it's one of my favorites as well.
That's amazing. You know, one of the best things about aviation in my experience has been the things that it can do, sort of existential to propellers and wings and tails and things. You know, the airplanes are great by themselves, but the way they interact with people, it's hard to replace with anything else. And that's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Did we lose you there, Chris?
No, I'm still here. I'm getting a phone charger.
Ah,
I started this call with 100% charge, and for some reason, my phone is having an issue.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. And so about how many states or cities does the B-17 visit every year?
Boy, how do you want? I'm trying to think. I mean, on a regular tour season, this one's obviously different.
right.
I want to say probably a good 40 or so.
That sounds like it's in the ballpark. To be honest, I'd actually have to just pull up the website and see. I know it's just gone and you know, out working hard and earning its keep. In fact, that was something that we ran into before the pandemic came along. We were busy planning a launch event for the book in early June, and the reason that we were going to wait that long to really sort of get it out there was that was the first time the airplane was going to be free and sort of been back in Oshkosh. And so, you know, joking earlier about how we have this luxury of having a B-17, but and this season, this spring, it was actually out getting some repainting done. But on a typical year, though, I mean, we might not see it for a couple of months at a time as it's busy, you know, out on tour, you know, keeping flying its own missions,
Doing the job. Absolutely.
doing the job. Exactly.
Is the B-25 out there with it yet?
I'm sorry, you were cut off just a little bit, Brandon.
Is the B-25 out there with it yet?
Chris, you could speak to that, I think, better than I can, but the B-25 has been out at tour stops.
Yeah, it's done a test few, but not, we're sort of waiting to launch here whenever this is all over.
Yeah.
You know, May, it was supposed to in May, but then this all happened and the world ended. So
The world just got put on pause for a while.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pause is probably the best way to put it. Speaking of pause, and I know that I know Hal, you've got something else to get to, and we don't want to run over. One thing that all of us are thinking about as we get, you know, into the warmer months and we brush our airplanes off is AirVenture. And
Sure.
what do we think about AirVenture, and what's it looking like this year?
So, you know, as we're recording this on April 20th, right now, planning is still moving ahead full speed. It's been tough with the travel restrictions and other, you know, the public guidelines and things here in Wisconsin, because we have things like our volunteer work parties and that normally would be here on weekends doing their part to get the grounds ready. And so our senior leadership team and our board have met. The senior leadership team meets by phone every day to talk about it, and they figured out that we can make our sort of go no go decision as late as early May, and at that point, you know, all we can do is watch the situation just like everybody else. All we can do is look at what restrictions are in place and figure out what makes the most sense. Our top priority, of course, is health and safety of our volunteers, our guests, our visitors, and our staff. And you know, we'll make the choice at that time. And I think that if we are able to go ahead with it as planned, then it's going to be an unusual year, but I think it's going to be a very special event because we're all going to be sort of celebrating coming out the other side of this. If heaven forbid we have to make another decision, then we've got the best head start on next year that we could possibly have.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you very, very much for taking the time. I certainly appreciate it. I know everybody else does too. And I hope that as things progress towards AirVenture, it works out for us all to get together. But if not, we'll all see each other next year. So what's the next topic on the green dot?
That's a good question. Our producer, Ty, is probably fuming at his keyboard asking us the very same thing right now. we were kicking around doing maybe an aviation trivia thing, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Talked about that. We also talked about maybe taking the sort of that formula we did with the movies, TV shows, and maybe talking favorite aviation books. I know there's some guests out there. Not to give anything away, but I've got a buddy who flies for an airline now, but recently retired from the Air Force, flying something very, very cool at very high altitude. Who has been wanting to come on, and he's somebody that we can work with remotely. So it might be time to get him in the queue. He's definitely coming. I'm just not sure when that's going to happen yet.
Outstanding. Well, guys, thank you very much again for taking the time. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you all soon.
All right, thanks, Brandon. It's been fun.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us on.
I just don't have something cool to say at the end, like next time you're clear to land on the green dot.
Man,
So,
yeah.
we gotta work.
And don't clear people to land into Hangar 51. That just doesn't work.
We tried that once. We won't do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Hey,
You bet.
see you
Take
later.
care. Bye-bye.